Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you today with an article from Quillette. This is dated October 19th, and I've never done an article from Quillette before, and just so you know, it's going to just kind of suddenly end here. I know it says it's a 13-minute read, which would indicate it's longer than it's going to be, but I already tried recording this once. The recording was really bad, so I noticed when I got near the bottom that it just kind of ends because you need to sign in to read the rest of the article, but we'll be able to get through enough of this to get the point. So just letting you know that ahead of time. And it says, the article is actually called, "They Don't Believe It Either." It says the, in scare quotes, Gaza genocide calumny has become the left's equivalent of the stolen election hoax on the American right, a baseless accusation that signals ideological allegiance precisely because it defies logic and evidence. So let's go to section 1, and we're going to get through section 1 and then like the first paragraph of section 2, and then again it's going to ask to subscribe, which I don't have a subscription, so we're just going to kind of end it there. But give me a few minutes of your time, and we'll still get through this. But again, like I said, you'll get the point. So it says, during a public address in October 2023, as Israel was preparing to launch its ground invasion of the Gaza Strip, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu quoted a verse from the Bible that would echo through countless NGO reports and news stories. "Remember what Amalek has done to you." To those uninitiated in biblical mythology, the phrase may not sound particularly ominous, but Israel's critics knew better. In the book of Samuel, they pointed out, Yahweh, that's God for people that don't know, commands King Saul to smite the Amalekites, leaving no one alive, not even women and children. The snag is that Netanyahu was quoting from the book of Deuteronomy, which recounts a tale from centuries earlier. As the Israelites fled Egypt, they were ambushed from the rear by the Amalekites. Following this treacherous attack, Yahweh tells the Israelites, "Remember what the Amalekites did to you along the way when you came out of Egypt. When you were weary and worn out, they met you on your journey and attacked all who were lagging behind." The relevance of this passage would certainly have been obvious to his audience, who were still reeling from Hamas's surprise attack on October 7th. Not cutting that out. It says, but Israel's critics were not satisfied by this explanation. Amalek could not possibly refer to Hamas, they reasoned, because Hamas is an organization, not a people like the Amalekites. Therefore, when Netanyahu spoke about Amalek, he clearly meant the Palestinians as a whole. And since the Amalekites are being smitten elsewhere in the Bible, the obvious inference is that Netanyahu was demanding the annihilation of the Palestinians. And you see, like, how many different levels they need to go through to, like, justify that what Netanyahu's trying to do is something like that. It's not just, he said this and that's what it is. It's, oh no, that must mean this. Then because he said that, it means this. And then he did this. And then it's like, well, you guys are making too many assumptions. Okay, so how about just take him at his word? It says, for this reason, remember Amalek was alleged to be a dog whistle for genocide, and Netanyahu's quotation would feature prominently in South Africa's case against Israel at the International Court of Justice in The Hague. And the International Court of Justice will be abbreviated here on as the ICJ, of course. As it happens, just a few hundred meters from the ICJ, there's a memorial commemorating the Holocaust. It bears a bronze plaque, inscribed in Dutch and Hebrew with the same verse Netanyahu quoted. Remember what Amalek has done to you, don't forget. This time it cites the correct source, Deuteronomy 15 and then 17 to 19. And if I'm not saying the numbers part right, please let me know. It says, if Israel's critics had bothered to check, they would have found the same verse at the entrance of Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem. It is a well-established motif in Jewish culture, symbolizing the duty to record and remember the persecutions that Jews suffered at the hands of mobs and regimes throughout history. It says, as the German ambassador to the Netherlands expressed his dismay at this genocidal incitement against all German people. I think he's trying to joke there, but this is just a tweet from the author of the actual article that he's kind of going over what he just said, so we'll scroll down. It says, these facts are about the history and meaning of the Amalek verse are easily verifiable, and they were pointed out early on in the Gaza war when accusations about Netanyahu's use of allegedly genocidal language first surfaced. And yet, newspapers and NGOs have kept repeating this inflammatory canard without ever issuing a correction. There are countless examples of similar distortions. In an impromptu speech delivered days after October 7th, former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant told his soldiers that Gaza will not return to what it was before. There will be no Hamas. We will eliminate it all. A widely circulated clip of this speech, which appeared on the BBC and in the New York Times, The Guardian, and South Africa's ICGK, so all bastions of truth. Those news outlets, the BBC, the New York Times, and The Guardian, you know, because they never lie about anything. So they dishonestly admitted the middle sentence, making it look as if Gallant had pledged to eliminate all of Gaza. Gallant was also accused of calling Palestinians human animals. He didn't. He was referring to Hamas, the ISIS of Gaza. And Netanyahu never said that Gazans would pay a huge price, as even once reputable scholars have claimed. He said Israel would exact a huge price from the enemy, meaning Hamas. Nor did he threaten to turn Gaza into a desert island, a mistranslation by Al Jazeera, which is funded by the same regime that bankrolls Hamas. So you can see all the people that are screwing up, what all the quotes are all far-left outlets that have had their reputations absolutely tainted, or they were already tainted before October 7th even happened. Hi, BBC, New York Times, The Guardian, and Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera, as it says here, was, funded by the same regime that bankrolls Hamas, so of course they're going to purposely misconstrue what Netanyahu and anyone else in his government said. It says, and then there is Israeli President Isaac Herzog's assertion that it's an entire nation out there that is responsible. This rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved, it's absolutely untrue. They could have risen up, they could have fought against that evil regime. Herzog's phrasing was unfortunate and liable to be misunderstood, although it should be noted that some historians have made identical claims of collective responsibility about the German people under Nazi Germany. In any event, during the same speech, Herzog went on to clarify that there are many, many innocent Palestinians who will not be targeted by the IDF. And just an FYI, that if you look at the kill count of how many Hamas members compared to how many civilians or people died overall in this war, it's the lowest civilian to soldier death ratio in modern warfare, which means that Israel is quite literally the safest army right now. The IDF is the safest army. And I think it was Trump himself that said this, or someone in his administration, I could be wrong, said that there were 67,000 total deaths, and it was like 57,816 or something were Hamas fighters. Okay. So just an FYI about that. So it says who is that, Herzog, right? I just want to see what it says. Yeah, Isaac Herzog says here, he subsequently stated, so again, Isaac Herzog says, for the state of Israel, and of course for me personally, innocent civilians are not considered targets in any way whatsoever. There are also innocent Palestinians in Gaza. I am deeply sorry for the tragedy they are going through. From the first day of war right until today, I have called and worked for humanitarian aid for them, and only for them. This is part of our values as a country. It says, needless to say, these remarks by Israel's president did not make it into South Africa's ICJ case or into any of the NGO reports. Nor did the endless stream of official statements in press conferences, IDF briefings, and social media posts from October 8th onwards, reaffirming that Israel's military operations in Gaza are solely directed at Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and other armed groups, that the IDF does not intentionally target civilians or seek to harm the civilian population, and that Israel does everything possible to limit civilian casualties. The author says he can't recall another such instance of errant dishonesty making its way into serious reports and court filings. Every single report regurgitates the same litany of misquoted, misinterpreted, or fabricated statements by Israeli officials, sometimes just a few words strung together, as if they somehow constitute the equivalent of the Wannsee Conference. So what usually happens is that all those supposed bastions of truth that I mentioned before, the BBC, the New York Times, the Guardian, Al Jazeera, what they do is that they look at each other as sources, so they all misquote the same thing because they're only using themselves as sources and not actually looking into what really happened. That's how this works. That's what they've been doing. Okay? So it says, to be sure, some Israeli figures did make important statements in the overheated wake of Hamas's massacre, but these were people without military decision-making power, such as extremist rabbis, Knesset members, retired military officers, and media personalities, and says, and Israel is arguably not doing enough to prosecute these people. Says, and though horrific, such statements are typical of the belligerent rhetoric in every war, a far cry from the explicit instructions and chain of command needed to establish actual genocidal intent. Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that, like, if people you felt were your extended family were massacred, then you'd probably say some pretty harsh things too. I mean, just kind of, how it is. Doesn't make it necessarily right, but you can understand why it was said. Because even the hateful remarks by the far-right ministers of finance and national security, though reprehensible, do not come close to establishing genocidal intent, as these people did not have a seat in the war cabinet and do not dictate military strategy. Says they are mostly extremist rabble-rousers rallying up their political base. And like I said at the very beginning, this is where we're going to have to end it because I do not have a subscription to Quillette, and I didn't know this when I made my first crap recording. So I kind of got here and I was like, oh, we're not going to ever finish this. But it's good enough to give you the point, but we'll go ahead and read this first paragraph of part 2 here. It says, if the Gaza war was a genocide, it was the most incompetent genocide in recorded history. Had Israel wished to use the October 7th massacre as a pretext for genocide, it could have carpet-bombed the entire strip without endangering the life of a single IDF soldier. Instead, Israel lost more than 900 soldiers during the Gaza campaign and thousands more were wounded, precisely because it entered the enclave on foot and refrained from indiscriminate killing. Even according to Hamas's own statistics, which do not distinguish between combatants and civilians, the overwhelming majority of the casualties are male and of fighting age, which is inconsistent with a policy of indiscriminate killing. It says Hamas initially tried to fool global opinion that the casualties of the Gaza war were 70% women and children, but that claim collapsed under scrutiny and was then quietly retracted. Yeah, so it's one of those cases of like the lie made its way around the world before the truth actually came out. And then when the truth came out, it was like, yeah, nobody saw it. But that was never a true thing, and it was never going to be a true thing. But if you already hated Israel, then, for whatever reasons, whether you're a leftist or you're on the far right, well, you were just going to believe whatever Hamas said anyway, regardless of how it made Israel look. If it made him look bad, you were just going to go ahead and say, yep, that happened, even though it was just not true and never was. So that's where we're going to end it today. So let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.